All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, it's a necessary part of the understanding of life that we must grasp that we either adapt or we perish. We have to become more malleable and understand how to flow, how to roll with the punches, or we will be destroyed. It's a very simple fact of life in my view. Why am I bringing this up? Because over the last few months, many brothers have asked me about the quote-unquote controversial stand your ground law that came to prominence in 2012 when George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin. According to the concept of the stand your ground law, a person has the right to quote-unquote stand their ground when they feel like they're being threatened or menaced, even if they're the one themselves who initiated or started the potential altercation. They have the right to stand their own ground. So what does that mean for the so-called black man? Especially for brothers who believe that they're often on the short end of the stick when it comes to the stand your ground interpretations. And we all know, as so-called black men, this is not our rest, this is our captivity. So we do have to grasp, we do have to conceive of the notion that we're always going to be on that short end of the stick when it comes to the interpretation of these laws. But all in all, I'm of the firm belief that we have to use and manipulate laws rather than be so eager to change them or alter them. And I think that's where a lot of so-called black people lose out, because these situations are repetitive. So-called black man gets killed or gunned down. We run to some lawyer or some highfalutin so-called civil rights activist who grabs a bullhorn and stages a press conference and begs for the Caucasian man to love us. Well, we have to understand that even though we might get the short end of the stick when it comes to the interpretation of the laws, we do have the right, as quote-unquote citizens of the United States, to utilize those laws once we understand them. Our people oftentimes do not read, do not research, and therefore have very little understanding of where many of the loopholes are in these laws or in these statutes, and how we can use them to our benefit. So I say all that to say this: if you happen to live in a conceal and carry state, why are you not concealing and carrying? I think that many so-called black men have to learn that we have to utilize all the rights and privileges that we have while we still have them. I live in New York State. So in New York State, it's what's known as a castle law or a castle doctrine state. What does that mean? That means that unlike in states like Florida and in much of the country where they have the so-called stand your ground law, in New York, according to the laws, you only have the right to defend yourself when you're within your castle, meaning your house or your abode. So if someone were to approach you on the street and attack you, it's up to you, according to the law of New York State, to flee that person and not defend yourself. And if you choose to do so, you're both going to be viewed as assailants until your day in court. In Florida, it's different. Once again, someone has the right to actually start an altercation with you. If you try to attack them, they have the right to stand their ground and shoot you or kill you. So we have to understand these various rules. I mean, you have certain states where you can't even defend yourself if you're within your own home, like Vermont, and also in the District of Columbia, aka Washington, D.C. Even if you're within your own home, you have to flee an assailant in your own home if you live in Vermont or Washington, D.C. Ain't that a bitch? But just getting back to the point, so many of our people, we look at all these laws as racist, as opposed to arming ourselves mentally and physically, if need be, to defend yourself within the laws of the land, within the confines of the laws of the land. So we're going to go over a couple of cases that gained a bit of notoriety over the last year or so to see how to handle the quote-unquote stand your ground law the wrong way and how to handle it the correct way. So, of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Police say they will not charge a Florida man for killing another man in a parking lot after an argument. Surveillance video shows Michael Draco was pushed over by Marquise McLaughlin.
Now, brothers, before this story continues, I want you to please keep in mind that in this story here, Michael Draco, who shot the other person, Michael Draco is a Caucasian man. Marquise McLaughlin was a so-called black man. Marquise McLaughlin went into a convenience store with his son, his 5-year-old son. While he was in the convenience store, his lady was behind the wheel of their vehicle. And this other person, Michael Draco, the so-called Caucasian man, approached their vehicle and was extremely irate because they were parking in a handicapped spot or were parked in a handicapped spot. So he started to verbally harangue Marquise McLaughlin's woman while she was in the car. Now, when Marquise McLaughlin came out of the convenience store, he saw what Michael Draco was doing, and opposed to approaching him and trying to figure out what was going on, he just ran up on him and pushed him to the ground. Let me say this, brothers. When you decide that you're going to just go all out and get physical, understand something. If you're in a conceal and carry state, you should always assume that the person that you're approaching to engage in an altercation with has a pistol. A lot of so-called black men get caught unawares, and that's what leads to their demise. And I'm not trying to necessarily, quote unquote, blame Marquise McLaughlin for his demise, but we have to be more astute and more circumspect in mind before we initiate, these back and forths with people who we don't know. I'm always of the firm belief that if a so-called Caucasian man is very eager to start a confrontation with a so-called black person, it's normally because of three things. Either they're an undercover cop, an off-duty cop, or they have something on them, they packing something. It's very rare that a so-called white man or anyone of another race wants to start a beef with a so-called black man or even a so-called black woman unless they're bugged out or they have something on them. All right? So Marquise McLaughlin, in my view, that's where he underestimated Michael Draco. And we're also going to find out, which is one of the themes that I always address on this channel. Unfortunately for Mr. Marquise McLaughlin, his woman put him in a situation that easily could have been avoided had she not had that sense of entitlement that so many so-called liberal black women have today. I want you to pay very close attention to what she says so that we understand one of the factoids that led to Marquise McLaughlin's death.
Responded with a single gunshot. Florida's Stand Your Ground law allows people to respond with deadly force when they believe their lives are in danger. Protesters gathered at the scene yesterday demanding justice for McLaughlin. Meg Oliver, who's in Clearwater, Florida, spoke to his girlfriend. Meg, good morning.
John.
Brothers, pay very close attention to what his girlfriend says, okay? Because this is a very, very key aspect of this whole situation.
Good morning. As you can see, there's a small memorial outside the store for McLaughlin. The family had parked in this handicapped spot. McLaughlin took his 5-year-old son inside to buy snacks. Less than 3 minutes later, he was gunned down for parking here illegally.
He was just trying to protect me and his kids.
Brittany Jacobs saw her boyfriend of 9 years, Marquise McLaughlin, shot and killed in front of her. Last Thursday, they went to a convenience store with their 3 children. McLaughlin walked inside with their 5-year-old son. That's when Michael Draco approached Jacobs. She says he berated her for parking in a handicapped spot without a permit.
He wanted me.
Brothers, let me say this very quickly. I covered this in another video a while back pertaining to Mr. Sterling Brown, one of the players on the Milwaukee Bucks who got into an altercation with the Milwaukee PD that easily could have been avoided had he not had the sense of entitlement, where he himself also believed that he could park in a handicapped spot and then want to go back and forth with the cops when they asked him why he parked in that spot, as opposed to just acknowledging that he was wrong, taking his ticket, and going on about his business. Brothers, once again, a lot of silly situations can be avoided if we just utilize some rationale, some reasoning, and some prudence. That's not always going to win the day. America, of course, just like every other place on the planet, has a certain aspect of racism, some places worse than others. But many situations that our people get into can be avoided if we do not lead with our emotions and lead with a sense of understanding. I stated this in the Sterling Brown video. If you're driving up to a Walgreens, I believe that was the pharmacy that he was going to purchase a product from very late at night. If you're driving up to a Walgreens and it's an empty parking lot, that should make it even easier for you to actually park in a parking spot, as opposed to believing that just because you're running up to Walgreens for 15 minutes that you can park your car however you want. And unfortunately, that's the attitude that many people have who have that sense of entitlement. It's the same type of people who believe that they should be able to play their radio however loud they want to, however late they want to, because it's a Saturday night and you don't have to work on Sunday. See, those are the type of little situations that can become big situations just because of a lack of respect for your neighbor or your environment or the laws of the land. Our people are constantly being taught by the Caucasian liberal and the Caucasian Jew liberal that order equals oppression. And that's not the case. But let's get back to this case and let's listen to what this sister here has to say, because her bad decision making and her emotionality and her quote unquote liberal black woman vibe really precipitated a lot of this nonsense.
To, move my car, but, I have my right to park anywhere I want to park.
Surveillance footage.
Brothers, you hear that? So the person, Michael Draco, who clearly is mentally disturbed, told her to move her vehicle because she's parking in a handicapped parking spot. She said she has the right, quote unquote, to park wherever she wants to park. Brothers, you know how many so-called black men are dead right now or imprisoned because of quote unquote reasonings like that from their woman that they did not nip in the bud when they should have? As soon as they drove up to that convenience store, he should have told her, hey babe, that's a handicapped parking spot. We can't use that. We can't park there. Let's just find another spot. And, maybe y'all might go back and forth for a second. But once again, a lot of brothers don't do a good enough job of vetting their woman. According to this report, they've been together for 9 years. So if she has the attitude that she can park wherever she wants, no matter whether it's a handicapped spot or a regular spot, can you imagine what he's been dealing with over the last 9 years or tolerating? Because he thinks it is a natural part of a relationship. Let me rewind this back just a little bit, because what she said here was very, very key.
To, move my car, but, I have my right to park anywhere I want to park.
Surveillance footage.
She said that she has the right to park wherever she wants to park. I wonder if that's a Florida ordinance, or does she care? Or will that be disregarded because we have to concentrate on the so-called white man killing the so-called black man? And of course, there are going to be a lot of pro-blacks or wokety wokes who don't like what I'm saying right now. But brothers, we have to understand something. Either you're going to go all out or you're going to go all out. Those are your only two options. And certain people might say, well, you said the same thing twice. Yes, I did. Because that's the only way to go. You can't go half speed with it. Stop coming on the internet and talking revolutionary and talking tough, and you have no idea how to improve things. All you want to do is complain about the white man all day. We have to get ourselves right before we can rule. A lot of you pro-blackity black niggas, you're on some equality bullshit. It's not about equality, it's about rulership, man. A lot of you pro-blackity blacks are on some equality bullshit. It's not about equality, it's about rulership. That's the bottom line. So at the end of the day, we have to rehearse the righteous acts. We have to practice. Meaning what? We have to understand what are the laws of the land, how we can utilize them in our favor. First, we have to discipline ourselves. Then we have to discipline the so-called black woman. The so-called black woman, for the most part, is not going to hearken. Why is that? Because she's been given too many liberties by this society, by this government, by this rulership, by this kingdom, whatever you want to call it. So they're very good at playing all three sides. Like I tell you, brothers, the so-called black woman, the liberal black woman, let me specify, they have three altars. They have the globalist altar, they have the racialist altar, and their biggest is the feminist altar. So if she believes that she can park in a handicapped parking spot just because she feels like it, what else is she doing just because she feels like it? And because she parked in that parking spot, it attracted the ire of that bugged out Caucasian man, which in and of itself attracted her quote unquote significant other, boyfriend, husband, whatever you want to call him, to lead with his emotions, and that led to his death. And now there are two children who are going to grow up fatherless. And it's all because, we have to understand how to nip things in the bud. And at the end of the day, just to get back to the point of what this video is about, even if you're going to allow your woman to park wherever the hell she wants to park, and you're going to run out and be, super white knight or whatever, and push homeboy down, not even try to get an understanding of what's going on, you have to at least grasp that there's a very high probability that this dude has a pistol on him. And I should have my fully licensed and authorized pistol on me because we're in a conceal and carry state. And it would have stopped a lot of this nonsense that transpired. You understand that, brothers?
Shows McGlockton walk out of the store and shove Draka to the ground. Seconds later, Draka pulled out his gun and fired a single shot into McGlockton's chest. The 28-year-old.
Now, when you watch the replay, homeboy pushed him down and stood over him like they were going to shoot a fair one. And when the Caucasian man spun around with his pistol, at first he looked shocked. And then he got shot, and I think that he got even more shocked. Like, wow, this dude shot me. And then he tried to stumble back into the convenience store. Brothers, once again, we have to always understand that when we decide to engage in a confrontation, you never know what's going on in the mind and in the heart and in the spirit of another person. You never know. And a lot of so-called black men end up in a very bad stead following after the nature of their women.
Stumbled back into the store and collapsed in front of his son.
What did he take from you? Man. My soul, my partner, we did everything together. It's tough.
Draka has a concealed weapons permit and told police he shot McGlockton because he feared for his life. The sheriff's office says he is protected by Florida's Stand Your Ground law.
Hey, brothers, that same Stand Your Ground law can apply to you.
Which allows people to use deadly force when fearing imminent death or great bodily harm.
Let me say this also, though, brothers. There are cases of so-called black people who have their conceal and carry permit and have their weapon, who have defended themselves utilizing their weapon, and the so-called Stand Your Ground law was not utilized in their case. So once again, race is always going to be an issue. But if it's going to save your life, and if you have a good enough lawyer, you can use these same laws to beat your case. You don't have to stand there and get shot by somebody because they know the laws and you don't. That's my point.
Without a duty to try to escape the danger.
He had to shoot to defend himself. And those are the facts, and that's the law.
But Jacob says McGlockton backed away from Draka after he pushed him.
This is wrong, because all my man was trying to do is protect his girl like anybody else would.
Brothers, once again, there are a lot of so-called black men who are dead or in prison over a woman. Please keep that in mind.
The couple's 4-month-old son and 3-year-old daughter were inside the car during the shooting. Jacobs told me that she learned Draka wouldn't be charged from the news. CBS News has not been able to reach Draka for comment.
So let me correct myself. It's not 2 children that will now be raised without a father. It is 3.
The attorney's office will have the final say on whether to press charges. Gail?
All right. Thank you very much, Meg.
All right, so now, brothers, this is going to be another case involving the Florida Stand Your Ground law, except this time it's going to involve 2 Caucasian men. And once again, it's going to be over a woman. One of the men happened to be an Uber driver who was driving the girlfriend of the other man back home from a bar where I believe her man worked at. And the man, for some reason, believed that the Uber driver was the person that she was cheating on him with. So he decided to cut the Uber driver off and approach their vehicle with his phone out, trying to pose as if it was a gun. And unbeknownst to him, the Uber driver had an actual gun. So let's see what occurred here.
A Florida Uber driver who claimed self-defense in a new Stand Your Ground controversy will not face charges for the deadly shooting of another driver. The Polk County Sheriff's Office released the Uber's dash cam video from the confrontation Tuesday morning. It shows Jason Bowick approach the car apparently and threatened the driver before he was shot. Tony DeCopel is here with how the encounter unfolded. Tony, good morning.
Good morning. The sheriff's office says Jason Bogue thought his girlfriend was inside that Uber when he tried to force it off the road, and the deadly shooting occurred. The Polk County Sheriff, meanwhile, is calling it a classic case of Stand Your Ground.
This is a justifiable homicide all day long.
Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd says the evidence shows the Uber driver, Robert Westlake, acted in self-defense.
Jessica.
Brothers, let me say this very quickly. If this same sheriff had stood there and said this was a justified homicide all day long, and the person who had been killed would have been a so-called black man, a lot of our people would have been up in arms, crying racism. Once again, we have to understand how to utilize the laws of the land and not always be the victims of the law of the land. Okay? That's where our minds need to be at. What all these cases that I'm going to go over have in common is not even that much about so-called race or skin color, even though, once again, race is always going to be a major component. But the main factor that we're going to see is consistent in all these cases is, number one, is going to involve a woman. Number two is going to involve emotional ass men.
Jason Bogue stopped in front of Westlake, got out of his truck, and pulled out a cell phone like a handgun as he approached the car.
I'll say something.
Westlake called 911 as he tried to revive Bogue.
He ran me off road, jumped out of his vehicle. I couldn't get away. He came towards me, shouted he's got a pistol, reached for his waistband. I'm applying pressure to the wound. He's faintly breathing.
Police.
So in other words, Bogue was trying to flex. You may have heard two people on the audio say, "Oh my God." One of them was a female. Once again, brothers, not to digress, this video is about stand your ground. But ain't none of these broads worth catching a bullet over, okay? Ain't none of them worth catching a bullet over unless you're seriously trying to defend yourself and your family. If you're trying to do that, then of course you have to be willing to give your life. But in many of these situations, a lot of these dudes are just overly emotional, and they precipitated their own death by acting rashly.
It all started at a bar in Dundee, about 45 miles south of Orlando. Bogue and his estranged girlfriend Jessica Mazzarella were drinking here when they got into a fight. Bogue left, but was still watching the bar from a truck he borrowed from a friend. Police say Mazzarella was texting with Bogue while also helping a bartender get an intoxicated customer into an Uber. Bogue followed that Uber thinking Mazzarella was inside, but she wasn't. He told her he planned on assaulting the driver. But what police say Bogue did not know was the driver, Westlake, was a recent police academy graduate and armed with a legal concealed handgun.
Here's a message for the hotheads of the community. Don't do that stuff.
Hey, brothers, you hear that? my man, the sheriff, said, "Here's a message for the hotheads of the community. Don't do that stuff. There's no vagina worth your life." I hope you brothers hear that, man.
Good people carry guns, and they will shoot you a lot. Graveyard dead.
The sheriff may have a
Bang, bang. 6 feet underground. Hope you understand.
point there. This, of course, is not the first controversial stand your ground incident in Florida. Earlier this month, the man was charged with manslaughter after police initially declined to charge him in a parking lot shooting. And there is, of course, the Trayvon Martin case. The unarmed 17-year-old was shot and killed in 2012 by George Zimmerman, who was acquitted.
Sheriff Judd really speaking the truth there.
Yes, he was. Sheriff Judd was speaking the truth there. But did you hear how Norah O'Donnell reacted to the sheriff and how he spoke about this case? Now, had this been a so-called black man who'd gotten shot, she would have put on her fake television, "I feel so sorry for what black people have to go through in America," that fake veneer that many of the super liberal Caucasians on TV put on, especially these super liberal Caucasian females, because they're trying to form this fake league with so-called black people against white male hegemony. But because it's two Caucasian men, she can say out loud that she agrees with the sheriff.
About trying to warn people about this.
You have some Florida wisdom there.
All right, Tony, thank you.
Okay, so now, brothers, this is going to be my favorite of all three videos that we're going to cover pertaining to the Stand Your Ground law, because this is the case in which the so-called black man handled himself appropriately and with the understanding, the cognizance, that if he's going to engage in a possible altercation with someone who appears to be out of their mind, he's going to let it be known that he understands where he's living, and he's going to utilize the law of that state. And he's going to let that person know that I'm going to get to mine before you get to yours, because we all know what this is. So let's let this situation transpire. As we can see right now, we see the older Caucasian man there with the shorts on. Right now, he's trying to verbally harass and intimidate a so-called pregnant black woman. But we're going to see the so-called black man step in and handle himself appropriately and accordingly.
She's 15, dummy. What?
This girl big and pregnant. He's talking about, oh what? I would have decked his ass.
Is that threatening you? I did not threaten you. I said you were.
Now, brothers, not to pause it, but we can see here that the so-called black woman said, did I threaten you? I did not threaten you. Now, this gentleman who walked up is not an acquaintance of hers. He just happened to be walking by and saw what was going on and jumped in to defend the so-called black woman. Okay? So let me say this, and you'll see a lot of wokey-wokes on the internet say, oh, yeah, you know, we have to be chivalrous for our women. We have to understand something about the code of chivalry. The code of chivalry was part of a culture. Now when a lot of these Negroes talk about chivalry, they're talking about woman worship. But back during the medieval time period, chivalry was the code of the knights. Okay? So the reason why you treated your woman a certain way during the medieval time period or in the ancient world was because she was a virgin. She dressed in a long dress or attire down to her feet. She kept her head covered and she wore a veil. Okay? The vast majority of the time. That was part and parcel to treating your woman like a lady. Now today, the woman has declared herself independent. She's strong and she does not need any help. So once you put out that energy, if a man jumps in to assist you or help you in any way, shape, or form, you're lucky. That's not something that you necessarily deserve. You're very, very fortunate. This young lady here was very fortunate that this brother stepped in, because who knows what might have happened. That's why it's so important for there to be order and ordinances, because this woman is not supposed to be outside of her home unattended without her man. She's pregnant. But so many of these liberal and super liberal so-called black women, they think that they're super women, like they could do anything and they could defend themselves from anyone. And there are a lot of crazies out here, right? The common convention, or at least the historical convention, I should say, is that the woman was under the protection of her father until her wedding. And then she was under the protection and the authority of her husband. The woman is not supposed to be out in the middle of the street, pregnant, going back and forth with crazy people like this. This could have led to a miscarriage. But let's get back to the action here.
You heard what the fuck I said? I said you need to back the fuck up. That's you need to know. You're and you're a motherfucking man. Now what you gonna do? Go the fuck off. Go the fuck off. Go the fuck off.
Now right now, I don't know if y'all see it, but homeboy went in his waistband and pulled out the ratchet to let him understand. Right now we in Florida. I know where we at. You know where we at. So I'm going to reach for mine before you can reach for yours, because I'm standing my ground. You understand that, brother? So already off top, he's letting the Caucasian man know I'm not going to be a victim. If we're going to go out, we're going to go out shooting one another. It's going to be what it's going to be.
Put that gun away. Fuck you. Put that gun away, my man. Go ahead. You just put that gun away. You just spread me, motherfucker. Fuck you. Go to the store. Go to the store. You ain't a man. I ain't doing shit yet. But put your motherfucking hands on me now. I don't give a fuck who you call.
I'm sorry, I got to laugh. I got to pause it because I want to laugh over the track. But my man, he sound like one of them dudes out the 70s. You drive turkey? Go ahead and reach, sucker.
You did this. You're the one that's aggressive to everybody.
I don't care who you call. Call the cops. Call the cops.
In my face. In his face.
Yes, you do. I'm here. You got her phone in your face. We got this lady filming.
Just walk away.
She's got a gun now.
I've been recording every second, sir, since you got out of the car.
You and your business, get the fuck out of here.
Now look at this. The brother got in between, turned his back to the so-called white man, let the sister get in the vehicle and said, "I'm protecting you, don't worry." You see that? And really, he's putting his life on the line because he could have turned his back. The white man could have went into the back of his waistband. You never know if he got a gun. I mean, probably not, because he got his damn t-shirt tucked into his shorts, but you never know what somebody carrying. And still the brother went out of his way to do so. Point being is this: he understands the laws of the land, he understands how to use them, and he's not going to allow himself to become a victim.
Yes, I am.
You were about to hit a pregnant woman. I have it here on camera.
I don't care, boy. I don't give a fuck. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. I said, what, I will break your motherfucking face. That's what I said. Let me get my shit. Put your hands up. Go ahead. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. You got a gun. What? That's right. What? It's illegal. You jump on a pregnant woman. A gun at somebody is legal. I ain't pointing at nobody. It's a lying motherfucker. I got it on you.
Hey, the white man threw the weakest punch in the history of boxing, man. What the hell was that? He was tickling. The brother said, "Why you tickling me? Only my wife tickled me there. Back up, sucker."
That's right, motherfucker! Do it again! Do it again! I'd like to kill you, you motherfucker! You know, hit people! You don't say it! What the hell is wrong with you? What?
He don't know a check that his ass could not catch.
Now, brothers, it's very obvious, and this is why I like this clip so much, because the brother handled himself appropriately. And like I stated earlier in the video, 99 times out of 100, when you see a so-called non-black person harass a so-called black person or approach them in a confrontational way, even if it's to a degree warranted, even if that so-called black person happened to be infringing upon the laws in a certain degree, usually when a non-black person approaches them in a very confrontational, overt way, it's either because they're an undercover cop, they're an off-duty cop, or they're a little bugged out of their mind. This person here, the Caucasian man, the older Caucasian man, is clearly, or so-called Caucasian man, is clearly bugged out of his damn mind. And he could have lost his life. He already saw that the brother had the pistol on him, and he still punched him in the stomach with that little weak-ass with that little weak-ass tickle that he threw. Now, what if the brother pulled back out and just shot him and killed him? That's how you know that this old dude is not in his right mind. But once again, the brother is keeping everything under control.
You hit him first.
The Caucasian man said, "I didn't touch him." Don't even understand it's on video. Shows you he's completely disassociating from what he's doing. That's how you know that he's not in his right mind. He's probably on some type of medication.
You hit him first. I'm about to leave ground beef in my car and stuff, trying to be defending this pregnant lady. I've been recording since he got out of the car. Since he got out of the car. Well, they love to call the police, but this white man about to jump on this damn pregnant girl. Hell no. She better defeat my pregnant ass with a phone. Fuck out his old ass. Run your motherfucking mouth.
The sister behind the camera talking shit now. She said that she would have tried to fight him even if she was pregnant. But you know why? You know why, unfortunately, brothers? why a lot of sisters have that attitude is because, once again, they have that independent, strong black woman mentality, because at all times a pregnant woman is supposed to be accompanied by her man, because he has to preside over the woman and the child. But you know, that's a whole other issue, a whole other video. Just to get back to the point, the sister who was pregnant was very, very fortunate that this brother came along, because who knows what might happen. But anyway, that's basically it on that. So for many of you brothers who've been asking me for my perspective on the quote-unquote stand your ground law, there it is. Peace.